Right, everyone, this is going to be a tutorial for recreation of the Russian street animation where a car moves across the iPhone screen and essentially represents a motion through the city. So in order to do so, we first create the belt, and we do it by creating cylinder first, increasing subdivisions, and getting rid of the inner faces because we don't need them, we just need the outer one for the belt. Now we adjust the size of the belt to fit the edges of the screen, and now adjust the width so it fits into the screen frame essentially, and kind of represents the feature that iPhones have when you cannot actually maximize the video to the full size without losing any part of the frame. And now at this point we already have created the belt. The only thing we are left to do is to flatten it out towards the screen, and to do so we go to animation and deform and lattice, and we do it with the 3 divisions because we want to just adjust the general shape of the belt by flattening again to the screen. And this version is quick and dirty, so we are not trying to get as polished product as possible at the end. We're just trying to break down the technicality behind the animation. And we also want to show behind the scenes kind of work of how to achieve this sort of motion if anybody wanted to replicate it. So we flatten out the belt with first lattice, and then we need to introduce the second one in order to flatten out the corners of the belt. In order to do so, we choose the lattices on each side and then adjust it on the y-axis rather than on x-axis that I did initially. So yep, by tweaking it a little bit upwards, we were able to flatten the ground much better than initially. And again, you can play around with the lattices and introduce a little bit more to actually adjust it perfectly to the screen so that you don't have any separation between the screen and the belt, and obtain as flat of a representation of a road as possible. Now we are doing the rotation of the belt, which is going to be representing the motion of the car through the city. So in order to do so, we first key select 0 frame for 0 angle at the y-axis, and then go to 480 frames and do 360. This will achieve a full 360 rotation of a belt in 480 frames. And in our scene, we are essentially controlling the entire animation through this belt motion, because the car is not moving, it's just being stationary. The illusion of motion is achieved by 360 rotation. At this point we need to create the separation between the road and the sidewalk and extrude it a little bit so that it is apparent, the distinction between sidewalk and the road. Last but not least, we're inserting one more edge loop in order to restrict our buildings on top of it. And the restriction is performed by employing the Rivet script, which you can find by just googling, and the first search that appears is the right one. And I already have it stored on my tabs as a Rivet mouse script. The way it works is you choose 2 edges, and the vertex in between is the one that gets restricted. So this location essentially parents whatever object you put on top of it and remembers its location. So since I have 3 buildings in my scene currently, I created 3 positions, but let's adjust it for the bigger building and move the rivet point a little bit to the left. Alright, perfect. And now we have 3 locations for our buildings. So the last thing to do is to position each building on top of the rivet points, and it is important to note that we need to have the location of the buildings restrained to the bottom so that they can be constrained to the belt itself later on. And essentially the groundwork is already done. The only thing we are left to do is position the right buildings on top of the right rivet points. Yeah, the Rivet points are out of order, and that's why it's a little bit confusing. So the last one is store, and we just place inside of the Rivet. This achieves parenting essentially, and constrains those buildings to the points itself. And those we can see on animation that the belt is moving, and the buildings are moving across alongside with the positions restricted. So the last thing we need to do is to blend in the buildings so that they disappear at the edges of the phone in order to replicate kind of illusion of a motion through the city. So in order to do so, we need to first key select all the objects, so all three buildings, because we want to achieve the initial state as them being in those positions in frame 1 or frame 0. At this point, we are moving across the belt and looking at the exact moment where the first building, the church, is going to disappear from the screen. So we selected it at first, and now when the rivet is no longer perpendicular to the road or to the screen, I guess, we key select those as 0 and remain X at 1, because we want to remember this information on the x-axis so that they disappear into the distance, sort of illusion. And then we do the same thing for the store, find where the rivet is no longer perpendicular to the screen, and key select those at 0 for Y and Z. And last but not least, we perform the same procedure with the last subway building asset. And yep, after this, let's try to see how it looks. Oh yeah, so I guess I didn't work with the key selection at the later stages, so let's see how it works in the beginning. And as you can see, the buildings blend in at the edges of the screen as the belt moves on. So the last thing to do is to replicate the same feeling, but for the buildings to reappear again on the screen. So we do the same process, but in reverse, essentially. We key select the 0 positions when the rivet is no longer perpendicular to the screen, and at the moment where it starts to be perpendicular, we know where to do that. And then we want to have the building reappear on the on the sidewalk itself, and we find the location where it happens, closer to the edge of the screen, and key select that position. So that works. Then we can select this one as 1, and this will slowly reappear as the belt progresses forward. So we do the same thing for the store. You can select those when it's almost perpendicular, and then find the position of the store when it's fully assembled and doesn't overlap the road or doesn't overlap the screen. It's good enough. And the last one, metro, find the edge between the perpendicularity and non-perpendicularity, key select this, and now find where it fully reappears. As we can see, it covers the screen, so it's not a good location. And now it's fully on the sidewalk, which is perfect for us. We can select those, and that should be all done. So let's see the final result. As we can see, the buildings blend in on the edge and then reappear the same way at the other edge of the screen. And yeah, I guess the overall illusion of the motion of a car through the city as the buildings slowly disappear and reappear again on the horizon kind of resembles a car driving through Russian street, which was exactly what I wanted to achieve. So I hope this tutorial was helpful for you guys, and thank you very much for listening.